just want to tell you how far we've gotten. You probably can gather that we're going to accept permaculture and its influences back and forth with other environmental design systems to a point. We're going to talk about trends, and so how, if there's trends in these new patterns that are emerging. We've listed about 160 initial patterns. There could be more or less in any sort of final working version that will be released onto the internet. And there's a lot more work to do. In other words, we've just kind of begun this process. So basically, what have we found in terms of sort of trends beyond Christopher Alexander and into an emerging permaculture pattern language? Well, obviously, some sort of emphasis on the environment is absolutely necessary and indicative of this new language. We're finding that there's some social, cultural, and economic patterns that are emerging as well, so that it becomes a necessary part of us living sustainably. So the economic patterns, for example, exchange systems, basically bartering. Is bartering a pattern? Or, should we consider it alternative exchange systems, non-monetary exchange systems, or Bitcoin or whatever, as a new emerging pattern? Does it add aliveness to the whole system? Does it increase our ability to be sustainable? So you can sort of begin to answer those. And so we have to ask all these questions through this process. We have found action-related patterns, so not just so much physical things, but things like carbon storage and sequestration. So we're trying to keep it as sort of a noun, as much as we can as a noun, but it really implies an activity. So there tends to be this trend toward action-related patterns to increase our environmental awareness and the quality of the environment that we find ourselves living in. And there's also this percolation upwards, where we're finding patterns, let's say water cascade, that's actually connected to water cascade at a higher scale, and that's connected at a higher scale and a higher scale. So there seems to be this percolation upwards of patterns as we admit of an environmental sort of protocol. And ultimately, we're working toward a global solution environmentally. So something like municipal permaculture, something that we haven't thought of much in the past. We thought of permaculture at the site scale, and maybe the community scale at best. We can think of permaculture being expressed at across a city or across a region. And we believe this should be an important emerging pattern.
Is that referencing the transition town?
Transition towns is a great example of percolation upwards. Yeah, exactly. So what really is it about patterns? These magic little sort of electrons that are bouncing around all over and are connecting, and they disappear and they reappear somewhere else in a slightly different form. Patterns actually are deeply rooted in feeling. And they actually arise from this quality without a name, this sort of creative essence of things that occurs as an event in space. And so if you want to look at the kind of the genesis of a pattern, where it actually comes from, it actually comes from an event that we participate in. And it's through these repeated events over and over again that gets expressed in slightly different ways, but we begin to recognize that reoccurrence of that type of event, and that can be expressed as a pattern. So try to think of it if you're creating new patterns that way. The other thing is that it's an organic process we're trying to capture. In other words, it's never the same. It's continually evolving. The pattern language continues to evolve. So you're not adding patterns like bricks in a wall. Like we'll add this one, we'll add this one. They're actually so related to each other that they kind of grow out of each other. So the way an embryo grows, all of a sudden it differentiates into another group of cells here, or it differentiates into another group of cells there, and continues to increase its diversity, its representative diversity. That's sort of how the patterns grow out within the language. So it's a very organic evolution to the language as a whole. And another interesting thing is to ask ourselves, does the pattern contribute to the solution to the degree where it can free it of inner contradictions, to free the result you're aiming for, the end product, free of inner contradictions or competing forces. So it's another really interesting way to try to get at the purity, I hope, what a pattern can be. So as we build patterns, who do we refer to? Do we stand on the shoulders of giants, of those who have gone before us, and check their work to see if there's patterns in their work that can be brought into this growing body of patterns? Very likely, that would be a good thing to do. We want to know what they were thinking and if they're included. And who else do we check along that route?
Look at what people are actually doing.
Pardon?
You look at what people are actually doing.
What they actually presented to us. And what they're doing, sure what they have done, absolutely. Sepp Holzer is definitely a doer. So is he saying something that we should be cognizant of it and include? So for testing, we've talked about testing already. Does it bring aliveness and generate life as part of the solution? Does it resolve inner forces and contradictions? Does it belong to some sort of ageless character and contribute to the whole? It's got to contribute to the whole somehow. And can it be included in a cluster of other working patterns and not be diluted? Can it still work within its working cluster? And I love this one. Can it raise the level of morality of a thing? Another way to check. Can it raise the morality of a thing so that it can become actually an expression of nature? In other words, permanent, part of a permanent culture. And it may be in different areas of the planet. Okay, and so we need to figure out who will do this testing. Well, if you're creating your own project or your own patterns, then you can test it, or you can ask somebody else to test them. If we're going to have this pattern language available on the internet, then there has to be some sort of testing before we can release that language. So we need to cross-check, we need to test, we need to write the patterns, and we need to try to see if we can post this on the internet for everyone to use. Then, of course, wouldn't there have to be also some checking? Because somebody could offer a rogue entry that wouldn't apply at all. I suppose Wiki is tested as well. It's reviewed by reviewers to see if the if the new additions into the Wiki world are legitimate and worthwhile. That's why you often see, provide a reference here. Is this really correct to say? So there would have to be that sort of checking as well. And so who will do that? So basically, if there's a group of people that are interested in working on this, perhaps we can move this whole endeavor forward and offer it actually for everyone to use someday. But that would be quite an undertaking, but if it's necessary to do, I think a group of people will come together for that. And of course, this is for everyone. The idea is to make this available for everyone, to lend legitimacy to permaculture, and for it to be available for everyone as a sort of a consensus tool that we can use. And of course, we want this available for the professions as well. Alrighty, so this is where we're going. Good luck. Thank you. I just want to remind you that I do consulting, and I'm interested in permaculture in all of my work, and include it certainly in one way or another in many different types of projects. So that ends our 5th and last TED Bite for today. All right. All right. Thanks so much. And thanks for being patient and sticking with the presentation today.